Does anybody not know that tune? My brother posted on Facebook this week that it's 30 years old. Yeah, and there was a special edition on this week of Ghostbusters. In case you didn't know it, and in case you've never watched it before, and I'm sure you've watched it if you're anything like me, we still remember that song as like a ghost of Ghostbusters living in our lives. It's like, if any commercial uses that like little hook, they put something else in it, I don't know, Auto-Way or something, that, it's just crazy. And maybe you remember, like me, maybe you've got the ghost of Ghostbusters living in your life. Maybe you remember these quotes like Dr. Venkman, "Don't cross the streams," Maybe you remember, "It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man." Sigourney Weaver's character in the movie, "There is no Dana, only Zool." Do you ever feel like you're living with a ghost? Do you ever feel like you're living with the ghost of Ghostbusters? And our entire Bible is like that too. No, I'm not saying that Ghostbusters is in the Bible. I mean, even, you have some severe proof texting going on if you think that Ghostbusters is in there. And no denomination gets away with that. But the Bible is interlaced with ghosts. Ghosts, in particular today, the ghost of Moses. In our text today, Moses has given all these blessings to the tribes that he's been leading throughout the land, throughout this desert. And he comes to this place and he starts telling each of the tribes how wonderful they've done, all these blessings, and putting these blessings on them. And here we are, and his life on earth is about to end. We're in Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 34, verses 1 to 12. If you wish, you can follow along on the back of your bulletin, and that's the text I am preaching from. Please join with me as I read this morning. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo on the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him the whole land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Mediterranean, the Negeb and the plain, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. The Lord said to him, "This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there." Then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the Lord's command. He was buried in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. But no one knows his burial place to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His sight was unimpaired and his vigor had not abated. The Israelites wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then the period of mourning for Moses was ended. Joshua, son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him. And the Israelites obeyed him, doing as the Lord had commanded Moses. Never since has there arisen a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. He was unequaled for the signs and wonders that the Lord sent him to perform in the land of Egypt, against Pharaoh and all his servants and his entire land, and for all the mighty deeds and all the terrifying displays of power that Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. Israel had been led throughout the wilderness for 40 years by this man. And there's some that say that Moses was a character that people developed and said this was the kind of leader that we wanted, or this was the kind of leader that could have been around at the time. I'm going to go with other scholars who say that this man was a man. He was a person, he was a leader, and it was a real person, and that these events happened. This is he that was born and placed in a basket, raised and reared in a palace, who then paid his mother to be his own wet nurse. This is he that murdered the Egyptian, married Zipporah, and met with God through a bush that was on fire. This is he that was instructed by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt from under the harsh rulership of the Pharaoh that he had grown up with. This is he that divided the Red Sea or the Reed Sea, so the Israelites could be delivered from the said ruler, and he who closed the same sea to destroy the ruler and his armies. Moses, he's the hero. He's thought of as the hero, the forefather, the founder of the Hebrew people, all those who follow the law, an icon. He that preserved and persevered with the Israelites through the moaning at his leadership. Oh, the same food every day, the same water, drinking the same stuff. Speak to any of your friends who are Jews and they will tell you how highly they revere Moses, a Hebrew that grew up in an Egyptian palace with an Egyptian name, pioneer of dividing the seas, spoke with God directly in the tabernacle, on top of a mountain, big mountains, not like Mount Dora, big mountains, mountains that were 2,600 feet. He goes up to this particular one on Pisgah, Mount Nebo, to speak to God one last time. We don't know if he knew it was last time, but he ascends 2,680 feet. And he showed him the land, the promised land, that land that was promised so long ago. Throughout the whole Pentateuch, throughout the first 5 books of the Bible, those first 5 talk about this land, and Moses gets to see it. God promised this to Abraham way back in Genesis 15. To your descendants, I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. He said the same thing to his son Isaac. Isaac, the one that Abraham was going to sacrifice because God told him to. He said to him, I will make you an offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands. And all the nations of the earth shall gain blessing for themselves through your offspring. Said the same thing to Jacob in Genesis 28. I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your offspring. He can see it right in front of him. I got a slide of what it possibly could look like. This is what he saw. And it's like that today. Go on Google Earth, Google in Mount Nebo. Make sure you do Israel, because you'll go to the US one. Mount Nebo, Israel, and it's just the same it is today. This is probably what he saw. And there, he died. His ghost or his spirit lived on, though. His ghost or his spirit lived on. And we get a little twitchy in church when we start mentioning ghosts. Ooh, we start thinking of things that look like characters in Ghostbusters. We start developing these kind of things in our head of what a ghost could probably look like. Maybe we start thinking about Halloween movies we watched when we grew up. If you're me, it's like an ancient building or a castle or a dusty village hall that have these like strange sounds and night stories of grisly ghouls from every tomb closing in to seal your doom. So you got that one. The last service didn't get that. But what I mean by the ghost is that he when he did in his life, lived on after his life. His spirit lived on. His ghost lived on. His soul was embedded in others. His life went on beyond his death. Do you live with any ghosts? What kind of ghosts are they? Or maybe, who laid your hands on you when you were younger, early in your life? Moses left behind his ghost to a great leader. Earlier on, God said in Numbers to Moses that he was indeed leading the Israelites to the promised land. Oh, but by the way, you're not going to get in there. You're going to be dead with your brother Aaron, not living on the earth anymore. Is there someone, a great leader, you know, who's not here anymore, who's deceased? Someone in your family that you know whose ghost still lives with you? A couple of months after we'd been here, when we moved to the US, my mother and father shortly came over to see the house that we moved to. I was a little nervous, you know, like any son. I was making sure the house looked okay and cleaning the leaves out of the gutter. And I remember my father, he was really happy. He was sitting in the corner by the pool, and he was watching the thing in the pool, you know, the cleaner in the pool going around. He's like, this is great. He's just sitting there. He was so happy, and the sun was shining. He wanted the sun. He's a typical Brit. He wanted the sun all of his life, And finally, we had it in my son's backyard. He says, I think we'll move here. No, you won't. You've lived in the same place for 30 years. You won't move there. You won't move it. And they went back to England after their stay, and I was talking to him on the phone. He says, I was talking to your mom, and we're going to move over. Oh, yeah, I'll believe when I see you. No, and he said, we're going to come over. I talked to your mom. We're going to do it. Okay. Same year, December the 3rd, 7 o'clock in the morning, I got the phone call. Nobody calls at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's my mother. How did it happen? What happened? Well, it's his heart, Keith. He pulled over to the car was overheating, and he pulled over to the side of the road, and he had a heart attack. Well, he was coming over here. He was going to stay here. He was going to come over here with us. He was going to be with us. What do you mean? He's not here. I couldn't handle it. I was in the house, and the kids were watching me. I walked outside, smacked the wall a few times, punched the house wall, picked up the lawnmower, swung that baby around, threw it around my head a little. What do you mean he's not coming back here? What do you mean he's dead? He was going to spend, wait a minute, he hasn't even seen my fourth child yet. My fourth child, David, had just been born 3 weeks ago. He hasn't seen him yet. He's going to be here with us. Dad's ghost, though, still lives on in me. I still do things like him. I fix the house. I bring the kids up like he did. I bring up my family like he did. I build things. I follow the same football team. God forbid I didn't. You do these things you find yourself doing. I shout at the kids in the same manner he shouts at me. I build the family like he does. Dad's ghost still lives within me. Do you ever feel like that? Is there someone you have whose ghost still lives within you? Is there someone whose hands touched you, who touched your life, and that person lives on within you? After a couple of short moments in the text, Moses, going back to Moses, what probably took a long time for Moses to respond, he said to him, who's going to take over, God? Who's going to take over from leading these people into the land? Who will know the way to lead and the way to lead these people through into the promised land? Who's going to follow your voice? And God said, Joshua. And there was nothing wrong with Moses neither. He said his eyes were fine. His eyes were doing fine. Geez, he climbed the whole stinking 2,600 feet to get up to the top of Mount Pisgah. He was pretty healthy. He'd said to Moses, lay your hands on Joshua. And Joshua probably watched everything that Moses did. He watched how he dealt with the moaners and the complainers, those who were worried, just kept complaining about the same food every day. He watched them in these difficult political situations. He watched them build these tribes. He watched them build the tabernacle. I think he took particular notice of how to open a Red Sea, because Joshua went on to also lead the Israelites through the Jordan River. Moses' ghost lived in Joshua. And it says that Joshua had the spirit of wisdom, but not right away did they notice this. Not right away. They mourned for 30 days. They were sad, to put it mildly. Some of us are still sad. I'm still sad. But never before had there been a leader, a prophet like this guy. Never before had there been someone who undertook the terrifying deeds of the Lord. Never before had there been someone who spoke to God face to face. He was the poster child for opportunity for the divine and the human cooperation. He even at the prime old age at 120, I don't care how old you are, you're not getting off the hook. Never before had there been a leader like Moses. His ghost or his spirit didn't stop at Joshua neither. It didn't stop at the end of the book of Joshua. The Apostle Paul in the scriptures talks about him all the time. He was like the representative of the law, especially in Romans 9. He was that highly honored by Jesus that he met with him and Elijah on top of another mountain, Mount Hermon. God revered him so highly that he met with him on a mountaintop. We call it the Transfiguration. And he met with him there to say, this was a type of Jesus. These guys, Elijah and Moses, they were precursors to me. At this time of year, we want some sort of epic ghostly scene. We go around looking for places like this. Was one of them. Yeah, he was transfigured. The word means he was literally turned inside out. So you've seen all his insides, and his face just shine like the sun, and his clothes were white, dazzling white. It's pretty scary. Even at the establishment of the new church, the new guys, the pioneers of the way, the pioneers of Christianity, they had this great speaker, Peter. And Peter talked about Moses and said to him, by the way, here's a history lesson. You guys are still not listening to him. He said to them, this is Moses whom you've rejected, which is no different than you're doing now to Jesus. It's the same thing, history repeating itself again. Rejected by his own people. In John's Gospel, Jesus is quoted as saying, if you believe in Moses, you should also believe in me. In fact, the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy is the most quoted book in the New Testament, especially with relating Moses to a type of Jesus. All the way through the New Testament, Moses is a type of Jesus. And one of the biggest ways is talked about as a food provider. Moses got manna from heaven, manna and quail from heaven. And when they didn't have any food, when the disciples were saying we didn't have any food, they went to the boy and the food, the loaves and the fishes, and Jesus provided. Clearly, the ghost of Moses lives on in our Bible, and it also lives on in society. I don't know if you guys ever seen the Prince of Egypt. It was a DreamWorks movie a couple of years ago, but people are fascinated by that story. Because he came from a basket, became a prince, decided to murder, and then became God's high priest. I'll say it again. He came from a basket on the River Nile, became a prince in a palace, decided to murder an Egyptian, and then became God's high priest. He was the one that spoke to God. And people are still fascinated with this story. December 13th, this year, the same story comes out, not in the cartoon version, but the real version, Exodus, Gods and Kings. I'll be there watching it. It's a fascinating story. The last movie did $70 million in the box office. But he inevitably died. It's a pivotal moment, the death of a great leader of whom they put their trust in. And yet also a chance for better. The people got to enter into the promised land. Unfortunately, death has to happen to leaders, to fathers, and to family. But ghosts, memories, mannerisms, traditions, dad jokes, things that you say that just embedded in your head live on. Whose ghost is alive and living in you? As we come to that day of celebrating ghosts and ghoulish and spiders and witches, there are some ghosts that we don't particularly want hanging around. Each of you knows them, and God knows them too. And I'm sorry, they were very helpful in the entertainment industry, but Doctors Venkman, Stans, and Spengler will not bust our ghosts for us. They won't bring us peace. That would be far too easy. What will bring us peace is for us to be obedient to God, embracing those ghosts that are good for us, seeking help for those ghosts that are not, Maybe we ask ourselves the question, does that ghost cause me and move me and inspire me to move on with God like it did Joshua? As Joshua embraced Moses' ghost, and Peter preached Moses' faithfulness to those around him, those who were upsetting him, as Jesus pointed to and revered Moses on the mountain, may we too embrace the ghost of Moses. As he worked with God in delivering the Israelites out from wandering in the desert into a place of peace and rest, may our ghosts, that spark, lead us into righteousness and lead others into the promised land.